Hey friend, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here listening to another episode of the Pattern Design Circle podcast. Here we talk all about the ins and outs of designing knit and crochet patterns and running a business that makes it all possible. I'm Jessica, your host, knitting pattern designer, design mentor, and the friend in your ear. Can't wait to dive right in. Pattern Design Circle podcast is sponsored by the Pattern Design Circle, a membership community for knit and crochet pattern designers that are feeling lost, lonely, or frustrated in their business. It connects you with a supportive community that's always eager to answer your questions and help you through the hard times. And there's loads of resources and activities specifically catered to business and designing. Sound like your jam? Check it out at snickerdoodleknits.com/design-circle. That's snickerdoodle, like the cookie, knits, knits.com/design-circle. All right, let's get into it. Welcome back to the Pattern Design Circle podcast. This is episode 4, and we're talking all about working with a tech editor. This is actually really important as a pattern designer. So, first of all, I'll say don't do how I did it when I started. I'll talk more about that. But if you don't know what a tech editor is, a tech editor is a person who goes through a pattern before it has been released to look over it for things like accuracy and clarity, really to make sure that your pattern is right. So it basically gives you the confidence that what you're releasing into the world is actually good. Like that people can actually work from it, knit from it, crochet from it, all of that kind of thing. And tech editors are, like I said, really important. You're probably familiar with test knitting or test crocheting. If not, that is where folks typically for free go through your pattern and they work it. They actually knit it or crochet it to create the actual thing. So what they're doing is they're making sure that it actually works, that it makes sense to follow from a knitter or crocheter's perspective, of that kind of thing. But they aren't actually usually, because sometimes you do get some test knitters that are really good at this, but in general, they're not looking at the technicalities of things. They're not checking the math. They're not checking your dimensions. That's part of the math. And they're not looking for things like grammar errors and things like that. Often, or sometimes they do catch errors in things like stitch counts or like, hey, this actually isn't working with my stitch count. But from my experience, I've found a lot of times test knitters and test crocheters, they doubt themselves. And so rather than thinking there's something wrong with the pattern, they assume there's something wrong with them. They then just like tweak it so that it works on their needles and they keep going. So test knitting and test crocheting is extremely valuable to know that, the pattern actually makes sense to a knitter or crocheter who's actually going to be working your pattern. It also is extremely valuable in knowing that, hey, this actually fits the sizes it's supposed to fit. And it's so fun to see the actual projects, to see people actually working from your pattern. I think it can be nerve-wracking going into testing because it's like, I hope this is okay. I hope that they like it. I hope that it works, even though you've put tons of effort into it. That it seems like across the board, that's often a concern going into testing. But then afterwards, the confidence it gives you to actually launch that pattern is like, now you're like uber confident that it actually works and that people enjoy it and that it makes sense and that it's easy to follow and all of these kinds of things. So anyway, this is not about test knitting. Next to episode 6 will be about test knitting, but I do kind of want to share the contrast between test knitting and tech editing. The tech editing, which is actually technical editing, is technical. They're looking for line by line to make sure all of the instructions are correct mathematically, checking to make sure punctuation and grammar and all of that is correct. It's really polishing up your pattern to make sure it's a good product. So several folks might feel like they are good to go with test knitting and just skip the tech editing. But I think tech editing is so, so, so valuable, um, because it really is getting into the nitty gritty of the pattern. It's really looking at the technical details and looking at accuracy and things like that. It's the best way, in my opinion, to curb questions from knitters and crocheters down the line after you've launched the pattern, and maybe they're confused or it's not working or things like that. So the other thing is that as a beginner designer, tech editors can teach you a lot about how to write a pattern concisely and effectively in a way that makes sense to the knitters and crocheters, and in a way that they're used to seeing. So as a beginner designer, you might not be so familiar about what is typical for ways to describe different techniques or steps, or just how to write your instructions and things like that. And so working with a tech editor is so helpful. And so that's why I really recommend that you start with a tech editor from the very beginning. Now we'll talk more about cost. Usually cost is the whole reason that designers don't want to hire a tech editor. I get it. I did that at the beginning too. I didn't hire a tech editor until I was probably close to about my 8th pattern, and I just did it for that one, because it was a bit more complicated with lace and things like that. And then I didn't do it have a tech editor again for another. I was probably on to like pattern 12 or 15. Maybe even farther than that. Well, I designed more than that. I hadn't published more than that. But anyway, it was a year after I started designing that I actually, a year and like a month or 2 months, that I actually started hiring a tech editor for all of my patterns. And what I did at that point was I was like, okay, I want all of my patterns to be high quality. I want them to be correct. I want them to be something that I know I'm really proud to share, and B, my customers can know that they can rely on, know that it's really good. I hadn't had like questions from folks. It wasn't like I was having a bunch of issues with my patterns, but it was more just about wanting to have a professional, high quality product. And I think we should really care about that in our industry. We do have a lot of designers that don't care about that. And without going on to too many of my personal opinions, really what happens when we're not putting the time and the energy into creating a professional, high quality product in our patterns is that we lose a lot of trust in our customers, and we, as as a collective community, and it brings down the perceived value of our product. But when we're putting all of this effort into creating a professional product that folks can be extremely confident in purchasing and then making, it just makes the whole community better. It gives designers a better perceived value, and just makes folks see a little bit more about how much work actually goes into a design and things like that. Okay, so anyway, basically, I think tech editing is extremely important for the professionality of your patterns. And like I said, I think don't do what I did. Start at the beginning. And because then when I did hire my tech editor, she taught me how to write charts. So I went through and I added charts to all of my patterns, and I had her go through all of my existing patterns at that point, plus all of the ones that I was working on. So at the time I was working on designing 11 patterns that were a part of 3 collections. And I had already published, I don't know, close to 12 patterns probably. So I was having her go through 30 patterns, 30 plus patterns over the span of a few months, and we were working through all of these. And I really learned a lot. I had only been knitting for little over a year, about a year and a half. Like seriously, when I started designing, I had done some knitting off and on for probably over 10 years. I learned when I was a kid. But that that information that the tech editor could give me was so valuable in helping all of my pattern writing. So definitely think start with a tech editor from the beginning. It will help your pattern writing so much, and they can answer so many questions that are difficult to find answers for online and things like that. The other thing, I'm getting ahead of myself here now, but the other thing is that when I hired my tech editor, the amount of relief I had around going to testing or launching my patterns, that relief, like I had so much more relief. I had confidence that it really was great. Like I'd done test knitting for all of my patterns. It wasn't that I was like just writing stuff and throwing it up, but I would go through my patterns several times just looking for all of the things, making sure it was perfect, all of this kind of stuff. And once I hired a tech editor, a lot of those phases of review I didn't worry about anymore. But yeah, it means that there's smaller mistakes that my tech editor catches occasionally, but it reduces the amount of my time that I'm spending on writing my patterns drastically because I'm not having to check and recheck all of my numbers and everything that I've written 10 times just to feel confident that it actually works. So what does the tech editor do? First of all, the tech editor is looking for accuracy. They're checking to make sure that the pattern works. All of the numbers line up for all of the sizes. They're checking all of your stitch counts throughout. They're checking all of your increases and your decreases, making sure that the numbers all add up. For this reason, I think it is extremely important to do tech editing before you do test knitting. You can save your test knitters and yourself a lot of frustration and just ill feelings if you do the tech editing before you do the test knitting, because then when you go into test knitting, you know that the numbers are right. You don't have to worry about changing numbers while people are working on your pattern, or you don't have to worry about holding people up because you're changing numbers. I did have, before I hired a tech editor, I'd have to change my numbers while folks were working on it. And sometimes people breezed through it and did it even though it didn't work, or the sizing was off or something like that. And so then half of my test knitters had finished. And here I'm trying to edit the pattern. And now I no longer have a completely test knit version of the pattern because they test knit a previous version and maybe I changed the length, or all these different kinds of things. So when you do the tech editing before you do the test knitting, that allows you to really be confident on your sizing and all of your numbers going into test knitting. Saves a lot of time in test knitting and saves your test knitters a lot of frustration and yourself. Okay, so that is the accuracy part. Tech editors also check for consistency, which was something that I thought I was really good at. But there are different things that occasionally I would slip up and change and just not even realize in my pattern writing. So these are things like, how do you write your repeat? How do you end the instruction? Do you end it with a period? And then do you include stitches increased and decreased? That's something that I didn't even know I should be doing before I had a tech editor. So I had my ending stitch counts and things like that I had folks checking in, but I never had things like 3 stitches increased for a row or something, So those are all things that the tech editor helps with. They check for consistency, not only in that pattern, but among all of your patterns. So you have a style guide. If you already have your style guide created, you can bring that to your tech editor, and then they can check against your style guide. If you're not familiar with what a style guide is really a document that you have put together that explains how you write your patterns. So you have all of your formatting information there. You have exactly how you write certain things like a repeat. So like, for example, do you use brackets? Do you use parentheses? Do you use asterisks? And then at the end, how do you denote that? Is that x2 to say times 2, or is that a repeat 2 times, or is that a repeat twice? Things like that. So tech editor looks for consistency for all of the things in your pattern, just to make sure that it's actually, like, it's not going to stump a knitter or crocheter who's like, wait, is this something different because it doesn't match that, or this is confusing me where the other one didn't confuse me. Even simple things like repeat 2 times versus repeat twice, or repeat 1 additional time. Different wordings and things like that. I found my tech editor helped so much with things that I just hadn't even thought of that actually can be confusing for different folks. And then the tech editor also checks for clarity. Now, I should say a little, like, put a little asterisk here and say different tech editors will do different things. So do pay attention to their website, their offerings, what they actually offer. But in general, this is what tech editors offer. Some tech editors also offer that they're willing to make your charts for you to match your written instructions. Some will even grade your pattern for you. There's a lot of different services that tech editors can provide. But in general, this is typically what I see. Sometimes tech editors don't edit for punctuation and grammar and things like that. So if that is, just pay attention to that. So anyway, I was talking about clarity. So tech editors are really familiar with a lot of different ways to write different patterns. And they understand what tends to be the most clear for the most amount of people. And they can help you, like, I guess I was just talking about this, with how you write repeats and how you write, tell folks to work something another, how many times? Are you saying work 3 times? Or are you saying repeat 3 times? Like, my tech editor explained to me that saying repeat 3 times can be confusing because is the repeating including that first time or not? Like, if you've put that instruction after the actual repeat. So anyway, there's just so many different things that they understand about clarity and how to actually best write different parts of your pattern. And that's extremely helpful, of course, at the beginning when you're first learning how to write patterns, but it's also extremely helpful anytime you're doing something new. And I think it never hurts to have that other set of eyes on your pattern, no matter how experienced you are, just to see that, double check everything. And, if your pattern is written really well, it's not going to, and, like, they don't see a lot of mistakes, it's not going to cost you nearly as much because they're not having to make comments on loads of different things that are having issues. So the one thing that a tech editor does not do is that they do not knit a pattern. So that's kind of the reason why we have both tech editors and test knitters, is because, well, yes, the tech editor can know your pattern in and out. They've checked everything for accuracy, consistency, and clarity. They know that all of the numbers work. They know that it's going to make sense to the knitters and crocheters. But there are some things that happen when you're actually working up the sample on the needles that a tech editor just can't see because it's not in the numbers. Just different things about something might be a little bit more complex than it sounds in the pattern, or like maybe you need to add more information on that. Maybe it is a matter of, well, hey, it doesn't actually work to XYZ in this part. So that's why test notes are valuable. But also, I recommend, and I know this can sometimes be easier said than done, but if you're able to have your pattern written up, or at least like the numbers that you want to follow, ideally have the whole pattern written up. But if you have the pattern written up before you start working your sample, you can check all of that as if you're test knitting it or crochet. And I think that is so helpful as a designer because, well, I think it's easier to actually work because it's more like knitting somebody else's pattern than working from your own. But also, you can catch little mistakes as you're working on it and fix those right away instead of waiting until down the line when it's with tech editor or test knitters. And now you have to remember exactly what's going on and you have to edit numbers and things like that. So just a little tip there. And not always, doesn't always happen for me, but when I do get that done, I feel like it goes so much smoother. So, and you don't have to have the whole pattern written up before you start the sample. You can write up, the first section, work that part, write up the next section, work that part, that kind of thing. Like you don't have to have the whole pattern written up to start with in order to essentially test your own work. All right, now, if you're listening to this episode, you probably haven't worked with the tech editor. So let's talk about the tech editing process. First of all, you will have to go find your tech editor. Different places you can find that. First of all, you can look at patterns that you enjoy working, designers that you love, see if they mention what tech editor they're using. They might even have spots open and you could use their tech editor as well. But other than that, my main recommendation is a free Facebook group called the Tech Editor Hub. Hub, HUB, the Tech Editor Hub. The Tech Editor Hub is actually a group that they have classes and everything for folks who want to become tech editors. But the Facebook group is then where folks hang out, and you can go there as a designer and say, hey, I'm looking for a tech editor for, and then say what kind of thing you've designed that you're looking for tech editing for. So, whether that's a garment or a socks, or because tech editors sometimes will specialize in certain areas. Like they might really love just tech editing socks or just tech editing garments. And if you want things like you want them to create schematics or charts or something like that as well, include that in there so that you get the tech editors that fit the bill. But the neat thing about that is that there's a mix of very experienced tech editors, and there's some that are very new tech editors that have just completed the course and are looking for clients. So oftentimes what the newer tech editors will do is that they will offer to review, tech edit your pattern for free in exchange for your testimonial or review of their work. So it's allowing them to get practice and really start working with clients, while you're also helping them by giving them some feedback and giving them a review so that when they start charging for their services, they have some backing to what they're doing, some proofs that they're good at what they do, and just builds the trust factor for other customers that may want to work with them. So that is especially my recommendation if you are worried about the finances. You can work with folks for free or for exchange in some of your other services. You might have something else that you can exchange with them. But that I think is so valuable just getting started. I will say, personal opinion, I do think that, especially as a new designer, it can be really valuable to work with a more experienced tech editor, just because they have that experience behind their belt. However, I do think that the tech editing course that the folks go through at the Tech Editor Hub is valuable. Like, to me, I still felt confident asking for them to review my pattern because I knew that they had an idea of what they were supposed to be doing. So it all depends on your personal comfort level and what you feel like will get the job done correctly for you. But just a couple of things to keep in mind there. All right, so we were talking about the tech editing process. First of all, you have to find your tech editor. You're going to reach out to them. You make sure that they have availability. Be very clear on what their pricing is and all of that kind of information, what they're actually going to do with your pattern, what their actual services are. And then once you've finished writing the pattern, you will send them your pattern. Tech editors have a few different platforms that they'll use. Sometimes they prefer to have just a PDF version that they can write comments on. Sometimes they prefer to have a Google Doc version that they can write comments on or make edits to. I, starting off, was very not trusting, I guess. I wanted to have full control over my patterns. So I always sent the PDF version. I never sent the document because I didn't want them to mess up something or change something that I didn't want changed, or like, what if they messed up my formatting on accident, or also I use Word to write my patterns, and I've had some like weird nightmare stuff in school where it was like you have like people commenting on it, and then you think you've cleared up all the comments and gotten it to go away, and then like the final version, when you like send it out to somebody, somehow still has their comments on it, or something didn't get fixed. And so my control freak side of me always sent out the PDF version. Now what I do is I send the Word version and the PDF version, so my tech editor can see, hey, this is what it looks like. Like, as the customer will see it, but also she can make edits as she wants, comments on the actual pattern, without having to use like a sticky note kind of thing on the PDF reader. But I still don't use the version that she edited. I always pull up her version that she's edited on one side of my screen, and I pull up my version on the other side of the screen, and I make the edits in my version, just so that I can, it just works better for my brain. So you do have to know what the tech editor prefers to use, what they are willing to use, but you can still make it work for you. Like, if they will only use a Google Doc, okay, but then if you don't want to use a Google Doc for your actual pattern, you can just take a look at their edits and comments and make the actual edits in your file. Okay, so they make the edits and then they send the file back to you. Or I suppose, I've never worked in Google Docs with a tech editor, but I suppose in that case, I could just say, hey, I have finished editing. But the point is, they do their editing process and then they come back to you. Occasionally, if there's something really big going on in your pattern that would affect a large portion of your pattern, they might come to you before they've finished editing the whole pattern to say, hey, these numbers aren't working out. It's going to change everything for the rest of your pattern. What is actually going on here? What should be happening? Because sometimes that's not clear to the tech editor that you're wanting to go this way with the sizes or that way, or if this part is actually the right part or that part was actually the right part. So there does have to be some communication between the tech editor and the designer. So they bring their edits back to you, you review them. My relationship with my tech editor is all of the tech editors that I've worked with has very much been back and forth. So they send me the edits. I make those edits. And if I have any questions, I then go back to them with the questions. But I always send the newly revised version to them because often the editor wants to go ahead and go through and make sure that everything now looks good from a formatting perspective. Possibly they'll take a look and make sure that the numbers are actually working now, things like that. It all depends on what kind of errors they found and how big the changes were. But there can be several iterations of going back and forth on pattern edits. All right, so I was going to talk about finding a tech editor next, but this time I actually wrote, a tiny bit of an outline for myself what I wanted to talk about. But I was going to talk about finding a tech editor, but I already talked about that. So let's go ahead and talk about what to look for in a tech editor. So it really depends what is important to you, but if you're wanting somebody who is going to check your grammar and your punctuation, you probably want to pay attention to their grammar and their punctuation on their website, on their social media, things like that, to know if they kind of know what they're doing, I guess. Maybe I'm not as trusting as I could be or should be. I don't know. But if somebody is going to be editing my pattern, I see on their website there's a whole bunch of grammatical errors and punctuation errors. I'm like, I'm not really sure I want to rely on you to take care of that in my pattern when you seem to be struggling with it on your own website. So that's just something that I take into consideration that you might want to take into consideration as well. And then so if you're watching the video right now, I actually have a whole couple of blog posts that I've written about tech editing. So I'm basically looking at my list from that blog post right now to show here. Another thing that I find extremely important is their reliability. This is something that maybe if you know somebody who's worked with them, you can ask about, but you really won't know until you start working with them. Also, a little asterisk here. You can change your tech editor. You're not tied to them after, stick with them for that pattern. Yes, you could have another editor edit it if you wanted to, but you don't have to stick with the same editor if it's not working well for you. I think your relationship with your editor is so important. My first editor that I worked with, she did a great job, but our communication styles just didn't work well for me. I did not feel comfortable asking a lot of questions. I did not feel comfortable. I just didn't feel I guess I felt kind of stupid asking her things because I'm supposed to be the designer knowing stuff, and she was like very prim and proper feeling in the way that she communicated with me. Now, my editor that I have now, I absolutely adore. If you're looking for a tech editor, actually, Joanna Fromstein, Tech Editing Precision. I can put the link in the show notes, but absolutely love her. She is amazing. She's done work for folks like quite a lot of work with Kate Atherley, and I don't remember who else, but that was actually a recommendation that I got from Ravelry. I don't remember where I was. I was on some forum talking about tech editing. I was like, oh yeah, I'm looking for a tech editor. Or folks were saying that, somebody was looking for a tech editor. They had recommendations, something like that. And I said, oh yeah, I'm looking for a tech editor. And this lady, I have no idea who it was now. She sends me a private message and is like, hey, this is my tech editor. She's really amazing. She's done work with blah, blah, blah. Here's her email. And at that time, Joanna didn't have a website, but what sold me on her was her experience, that all of the different kind of designers that I recognized their names that she'd worked with, things like that, made me trust her. And then I started working with her and I absolutely love her. Since then, she has created a website. Pretty sure if she still has it on the website, there is a really long testimonial from me just talking about how much I love her. So anyway, I was talking about the relationship with your tech editor. And that's really important because this person is going to be looking at your pattern in and out. They're going to be asking questions. They're going to be giving recommendations. You have to feel comfortable with this person taking your, let's call it your baby, because that seems to be a popular term for things that you have created and really love. You put a lot of time into. So they take this project that is really important to you, that you've put a lot of time into, and they're going to tell you where it could be made better. And sometimes that can be really, really, really hard to take. That like I put all this time into it. It was so good. And now like it can feel like it's just crushing you because now you have all these things that you have to change. But when you have a really healthy relationship between yourself and your tech editor, it makes it so much easier. And it takes time. Like I wasn't 100% comfortable with Joanna the first time I worked with her, and I definitely had to get used to the idea of I'm not perfect, and that's okay. But now I just adore working with her so much, and like we chat about some stuff outside of patterns and stuff when we're working together and things like that. And it feels more like a friendship than it does a professional relationship in some ways. Like she's professional and she's getting my work done, but at the same time, I'm not feeling like I have to present myself as somebody that I'm not. I don't have to act like I know everything when I don't. And she's so helpful with any questions that I ever have. So, that relationship is so important for having a successful, or what feels like a good tech editing experience. All right. So reliability, do they respond in a timely manner? Are they actually responding to you? Do they keep their word? Are they actually following through? For me, that is really, really, really important. And that might be something I was going to say, like, you don't have to, a lot of times you don't know that until you've worked with somebody for a while. But if you're communicating with them about hiring them and it's taking them weeks to respond, that might give you a little bit of an idea of their response time, and you can judge then if that works well for you or not. One thing that some folks look for is some tech editors will share the patterns that they edit on social media. So it helps give a boost when you launch your pattern to then have a tech editor, especially if they have a larger following, have your tech editor sharing it, and then it helps give your patterns a bit more visibility. My tech editor, Joanna, does not do that. And I'll admit, I've had a couple of times where I'm kind of tempted to like try another tech editor who does have a lot more visibility. But I do really love her work. So I'm still with her. And then their communication style. I mentioned that with, the whole relationship thing. How you talk is important. And really whether you trust the person and how comfortable you feel with them. And you'll get somewhat of an idea of their communication style from the initial messages when you're reaching out to them, trying to find out about their availability and things. But I think probably most of us in general are more professional and prim and proper up front than we might be once we actually start working together. So something definitely to keep in mind. But that also might be something that you really don't figure out until farther into the process, working with them for a few patterns. I do remember working with Joanna. There was like a point where I was like feeling really terrible about my designs and stuff. And I think I basically was just like honest with her. I'm like, I'm sorry, this is like really hard to take because I feel like I spent so much time on this pattern and feeling terrible that it's not perfect, basically. So I think you being honest with them, also them being honest with you about everything in general, if they have to extend a timeline or something like that, but you being honest with them can also make the relationship so much easier because like they're not trying to beat you up or tell you that you're a terrible designer or that your pattern is awful. They're just trying to help you make it the best that they can. And so just having that mutual understanding and being willing to be open and vulnerable and honest and things like that, really that helps any relationship, but it also applies to your relationship with your tech editor. Another thing that I like to look for, I guess I haven't looked for a tech editor now in quite a while, but I like to see testimonials. So just knowing what other folks are saying about their work. Sometimes they can have testimonials that are really vague, and it's like, I'm not sure if this person actually is the kind of person that I want to work with. But then if there are testimonials that are specifically talking about how much they love certain aspects that are really important to you about this person, that can give you a better idea of this is somebody I really want to work with. But if they have a website, definitely check to see if they have testimonials there. Even if they don't have a website, you can ask if they have testimonials. Also, do they have a website that showcases their work? That can give you an idea of the level of complexity of the designs that they work with. So if they have pictures or links or whatever, or maybe just a list tells you different patterns they worked from, that gives you an idea of, are they familiar with cables and lace and socks and hats and different things that you'll be working. You can always, of course, ask them as well, are you comfortable with working with hats? Are you experienced working with hats? Things like that. That can give you a good idea of if they'll be a good fit as well. And I guess the last thing I had on my list was, do they have the ability to edit what you design? That's what I just said. So in different words. So yeah, if they only are comfortable tech editing hats, mittens, and shawls, and you are wanting to design garments, that probably isn't a good fit. So those are just different things that I think are valuable to look for in a tech editor. If you're trying to find a tech editor for the first time and you're like, how do I even know who to choose? That's what I'd really pay attention to. Their reliability, their grammar and punctuation and all of that on their website, especially, but also sometimes Instagram, social media that they're on. If it's important to you, take a look and see if they're sharing patterns that they tech edit on social media. Pay attention to their communication style as you are sending messages back and forth and communicating to decide if that's going to work well for you. And you can ask for testimonials, take a look at any work that they've done, and definitely make sure you're aware of what services they actually offer and what kind of patterns they're actually willing to edit. All right, now let's talk about cost. So oftentimes designer or tech editors can't how about I say this again? What I commonly see from tech editors is that they charge between $20 and $30 per hour for their services. Sometimes I've seen that at $50 and up. And so if you have a very complex design, that can add up for sure. So I have a whole blog on this as well, but the question then often is, how do I decrease my tech editing costs. And the best way you can do that is to just review your stuff over and over again, just to make sure that recheck all of your spreadsheets, check that you got those numbers transferred correctly into your pattern, check for consistency, check for all of those things that you're asking your tech editor to look for. And that will make things go faster for your tech editor, because they have less things that they will be needing to mark up and comment about, and just makes their process faster. So that's my main recommendation, is to just, get your pattern into the best shape you can before you send it, so that you decrease their amount of work. Because when you decrease their amount of work, especially if they're working on an hourly basis, I mean, only if they're working on an hourly basis, I guess, then you will decrease your costs. And I'll go ahead and reiterate again, I already talked about it, but your relationship with your tech editor, I think, is so important. It's going to be so important, particularly for how you feel about your pattern, and how you feel about yourself as a designer. It can be the matter of whether you have high confidence or low confidence in your pattern writing style, and your just what you create as a designer in general. And it can mean a difference of dreading getting their emails or being excited to get their emails. It can be the difference of like procrastinating, putting it off, or just being excited to send it off to the tech editor and get their opinion. So I do think that maybe if you're listening to this and you are already working with the tech editor, but you're not happy with that relationship, go ahead and look around. Nobody said you have to stay with the same person. So that is all of the infos on all of the tech editing stuff. We talked about what tech editors do. They check for accuracy, consistency, and clarity, but they do not knit or crochet the actual pattern. We talked about the whole process of how you can go find a tech editor, and then how to then start that conversation, and then the process of sending your pattern to them, and then they send back edits and back and forth and things like that. I guess I didn't say in there, I do recommend that both of you confirm that the pattern is complete and that you're happy with it before you publish it. That's something that my tech editor always does. We confirm, just want to make sure that everything looks good now, that we're good to go. And she'll just respond, yep, it's good to go. Just to make sure that you're on the same page. And one of you isn't waiting for feedback without the other person realizing it. So we talked about where to find a tech editor. I obviously recommend Joanna, but also the Tech Editor Hub Facebook group. It's completely free to join. And you can also, ask around on social media or Ravelry or things like that as well. And then relationship is everything. So as always, if you have any questions at all about this topic of tech editing, please feel free to reach out to me at Pattern Design Circle on Instagram. And happy to continue this conversation. I always feel like we're talking here as if it's a conversation, but actually I'm the only one talking. So love to hear from you. Go ahead and give me a follow and send me a message on Instagram at Pattern Design Circle. And also a reminder that doors to the Design Circle are currently open for the month of April. This is April 2022. And you can find all of that information at snickerdoodleknits.com/design-circle. Inside of there, we do have a training from Tech Tip Talk. That's Sarah Walworth and Christina McGrath. They are two tech editors that are doing a lot for just educating around tech editing and helping designers navigate the tech editing process. But anyway, they were inside of the design circle last year to talk about how to improve your relationship with your tech editor and different things like that. So if you join the design circle, you will have access to that call as well. All right. I think that's everything. So I will talk to you again in the next episode. We have a very fun episode coming up. Episode 5 is going to be with Kinsey of Feel Good Social. We're going to be talking all about having fun in your business. Wow. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. If you found it valuable, please share the podcast with a designer friend. And if you have a minute, leave a review. It's so helpful and means the world to me. Chat soon.